and welcome back to my channel. My name is Lauren, if I am an unfamiliar face to you, and today I want to share my review of Gray After Dark by Noelle W. Ihli. So this is a thriller book set in Idaho. There's a young woman, I believe she's around 25, Ihli, and she's our main character that we follow throughout, but we also have a second perspective, and that is her teammate, Brent, and they are Olympians in the biathlon, I think that's how you pronounce it, where they are cross-country skiing and then target shooting. They are Olympic teammates, and he is also a main character or a narrator of parts of this book. So I want to go ahead and get into it and tell you a little bit more about my thoughts on the book. Okay. Let's go. First and foremost, I want to say thank you to Dynamite Books for allowing me to be an early reader of Gray After Dark. All opinions expressed in this review are my own. Gray After Dark by Noelle W. Ihli comes out on March 22nd, 2024. So literally like 3 days from the time I'm recording this. So I read this book on my Kindle. I got it from NetGalley as an ARC reader. So once again, thank you for allowing me to be an early reader, Dynamite Books. This was kind of like a white horse. I mean, originally my rating was 4 stars, but honestly, I might put it up to 4.5 because it's really hard for me to find a book that I'm just so completely enthralled by, where I don't want to put it down. I read it in one day, and when I do have to put it down to do like human things like cook dinner, all I can do is like think about the book. It's really hard for me to find a book like that sometimes. Usually they tend to be thrillers, so that's not a surprise. I'm sorry if you are hearing that noise. My neighbor, for some reason, decided to mow his lawn on a Tuesday at noon. So, alrighty. I do want to give a quick content warning about this book though. So it deals a lot with child loss, miscarriage, and stillbirth, and then also sexual assault and trauma. So we don't necessarily see any of it in the book, and it's not graphic, but we know it's there, and it is something that is troubling to our characters, especially Ihli. My drink of the day is water, because I've had about 4 cups of coffee today so far. So like I said, a little bit of background on this book. Ihli, our main character, she's about 24, 25, and she is a Olympian. She's an athlete in the biathlon event in the Olympics, and she has just returned from the Beijing Olympics. I think that was in 2022. That sounds right, somewhat, because she is getting ready for the next Winter Olympics in 26. So her team did not place, like they did not make the top 3 like you kind of need to do for the Olympics. And so she feels like she let her team down. Right before these Olympics, she had a very bad car accident. And from the first little bit, we can tell her mother is no longer in her life. And there's a lot of trauma behind that and guilt that she feels. So she's determined to train all summer and come back into the winter season stronger than ever, really. Brent, I talked about him briefly. He is Ihli's childhood best friend and teammate on the biathlon event. And right before the book starts, he has revealed that he has some deep romantic feelings for Ihli and has for forever. And he's ready to kind of act on those feelings. He's telling her like, I'm in love with you. And Ihli is very unsure about what to do. She does not feel as if she's worthy of being loved because of this accident and the trauma behind that. Ihli runs away. You know, that's what she does. But she does that in a way of finding a job at this nice tourist resort in Idaho in the wilderness, big wilderness with millions and millions of acres of land. So this resort is upscale. It's for rich people, for famous people to come. There's no cell reception, and she will be working in the kitchen there. In the time that she is not working in the kitchen, she is free to spend her time however she wants, and so she plans on training and running the trails around the resort, and so she can get stronger. But one thing I haven't touched on yet is that the tragic car accident that she was in has left her with a phantom pain in her shoulder. So much where it can't move. She's been to a lot of therapists, a doctor, she's seen x-rays and everything, and knows that there's nothing wrong, but it hurts. So this phantom pain almost becomes a symbol in a way throughout the book, and I'll touch on that later in my review if I can remember. But so she is also dealing with that while, you know, having the pressure of she feels like she failed her team at the Olympics. She's running, she's trying to be better, trying to push through the pain that she knows has no reason to be there. So she runs on these trails out in the middle of nowhere, and then on the halfway point, so she runs like 3.5 miles in, and then there's a lake where she can swim in, and then she runs the 3.5 miles back. We follow her for the first week at the resort. So this is while the staff is getting to know each other. They're kind of like college students, like you would expect, and preparing the resort for the season to start. And it's a relatively short season, June through October. So there's kind of a time crunch. On the last day of this preparation week, it's a Sunday, and we follow Miley throughout that day too. She decides to go on a run and a swim on her favorite preferred trail. Wes is one of her coworkers and has become Miley's fast friend. He works with her in the kitchen, and recently, like the whole week before, while she told him, oh, I run the trails, he's like, wait up, there's a lot of bears, grizzly bears. They're aggressive, they're bad, and even 4 years ago, they took one of our workers, Raina, and Raina's body was never found. So he tells Miley to take bear spray with her on her runs. She does so to appease him on this specific day. She goes into the water for her midpoint swim in her run, and that's when she's going to discover that the bears that Wes warned her about so much, they are not the only dangerous animals in the Idaho wilderness. And I'm gonna leave the synopsis there. I feel like that gets you to about 20% of the book. Man, it's a good one, I gotta be honest. Like, this book is so packed with action and planning, and just you never know what's going to happen. It's extremely unpredictable, and you're rooting for, you know, the good guy to prevail throughout all of the book. At least I hope you're rooting for the good guy. You know? Interestingly enough, Noelle W. Ihli, at the end of the book in her author's note, she put that this was inspired by a real story. Elements of this novel are fiction, obviously, but it was inspired by a real Olympic biathlon athlete who was abducted in the wilderness. I can't remember which state, but in the wilderness, abducted by 2 men and survived. And so this story was heavily influenced by that event. I believe it happened in the 70s or 80s. I would quickly like to say I gave this book 4 stars, possibly 4.5. It was one of my most favorite books that I've read recently or in this year. Like, it will stay with me for a long time, I think. Let's move on to the review. There's the 2 storylines, Brent and Miley. I hope I'm saying his name. I think it's Brent. It's either Brett or Brent, and I'm gonna go with Brent this whole time. Miley gets abducted by these 2 guys out in the wilderness who are essentially doomsday preppers. So Hamish and Fred. And Brent, he knows something's up from day 1. He is like, she did not call me back. She never not calls me back. Something is up. He joins the searches for her. He lives in like Colorado or something like that, but he joins the searches for her, and he never gives up. And even when they find her bloody clothing and they're like, oh, all the officials are like, oh, this looks like what happened 4 years ago with Raina. It looks like a bear attack. And he goes, no, it doesn't. She would not leave her expensive ass running shoes. She would have had those on her body if the animal took her. So he just knows, in like best friend logic and all that type of stuff, he just knows her. So he knows to keep looking, to keep pushing, to follow the trail for her. And so he and Wes kind of team up in an interesting way, search for Miley. But Miley is incredibly smart. So these 2 men who abduct her, they take her through the wilderness, and she tries to leave little clues. She tries to be sneaky and outsmart them at every turn that she possibly can to make it out alive. She At one point, she has a fitness tracker, and so while she's still in the lake and they're there getting her, essentially, she takes it off and hides it in her sports bra. And that gets chucked into the lake whenever, and it's like bright orange. Gets chucked into the lake when the guys find that and think she's trying to be sneaky. Brent finds it and goes, she never would have taken this off. This would have been on her wrist. She took it off for a very specific reason and would not leave it in the water. So what really kept me hooked about this one, it felt like Brent was just like one step away from finding Ihli, and that Ihli was just like one day away from being saved. And it just kept having that tension of he's gonna find her. She's either gonna save herself and find Brent, or, you know, something's really gonna, and it's like the next page, something is gonna happen and that big break is gonna be there. It also, you saw some interesting survival techniques. So the Doomsday Preppers, bad guys, I think they're living on this land. I think it's like federal land. It's public land to some degree, but they are like living on it out in the middle of the woods. Like they're not going to get caught with like a cabin and like chickens and all this stuff. They also, and this is like where it like really frustrated me, and I was like, these are shit human beings. They were hunting outside of hunting season. Okay, 1. And 2, they would shoot at animals right when they're abducting Ihli and they're coming back to their like little cabin homestead. They shoot at a deer, hit it in its leg, so like weren't even aiming. They don't chase after because they're like, oh, there's plenty of deer around here. Later on, we find that Brent finds that deer and it bled out. Now, the meat didn't go to waste because other animals got to it, but that just kind of shows you the character of these two men. So survival techniques or tactics that Ihli showed throughout the book that like just kept making me root for her the entire time, being like, you are so freaking smart. I would not have thought of that. She sneakily starts pulling out pieces of her hair. So she has like really, really blonde hair, pulling it out as they are walking. And that is how Brent is able to track her. It was so cool for her to be like, ah, my head hurts so much because I was pulling out hair and trying to leave a trail without them noticing, but would allow like dogs or trackers to find me. That's how she's found. This momentum that Ihli has at the beginning of the book and at the beginning of her abduction and kidnapping, where she continues to want to outsmart these men, it just keeps going and going and going, and it never lets up. And she bends, or she pretends to bend to survive, and she has to struggle with that, I want to say like hard-headedness in a way of being like, no, you are horrible humans. Why would I do what you're saying to do? And eventually she kind of like bends and is like, oh, I'm gonna do what you say to do until I don't have to, and I can get back at you in a way. Like I have to hide in plain sight. I have to act a certain way to survive. So she makes it back to the cabin, and lo and behold, there is another woman there. She's been there for the last 4 years. Now, who has been missing for 4 years and a body wasn't found? Raina. Oh, okay, so Raina, but why is she only responding to Mary? Because these guys literally renamed her. Like, Raina, Mary, that character is really important throughout Ihli's life at the cabin, throughout her storyline in the book, because she kind of has more emotional trauma. She was married to one of the men, went through 13 stillbirths / miscarriages, and is emotionally and physically and mentally abused by these men. These highs and lows that Mary and Ihli feel, it's told through Ihli's perspective, but they are so extremely human throughout this book. I think that's why I gave it so many stars. It really felt as if it were a nonfiction book and I was reading this and somebody had actually survived this. And also, Ihli is so frustrated with Mary and that whole inner turmoil between her being like, I get that you're doing this to survive and you might have some type of Stockholm syndrome something. I don't want to diagnose anything because I don't know anything about it. But you have something going on, but also you're starting to respond to Raina. At one point, Mary says, Raina's dead. And at another point, Mary says, oh no, Mary's dead. I'm Raina. So it's that whole psychological shift that you can see throughout Mary. And so Miley arriving saved Mary in a way. And they actually end up having a really sweet friendship. At points, Mary is like, oh no, you're gonna get me hurt. She already lost an eye. Okay, she already lost an eye from these guys. And so at one point she tattles and is like, Miley tricked me, or Ruthie Sue tricked me, and she's escaping, and punish her, not me. And then she feels guilty for that because she's been on the receiving end of that punishment too many times. And now she's getting rewarded in a way, and she knows what it feels like to be punished. So that whole dynamic between the two women is very interesting to read. And the whole time you're just like, come on, Mary, let's do this. Let's run away. Come on. Like, you've got it in you. Miley, even though she's like frustrated and angry at Mary, she like, you watch as she realizes and has to remind herself in a very human way that she can't be mad at Mary because Mary is a victim of Hamish and Fred as well, of these two men, these two bad men. Another reason I really appreciate this book is the physical aspect. So Miley is a very strong athlete. She's a freaking Olympian. Her body throughout this entire abduction gets like a beating to it. Like, she talks about how she loses muscle mass, how she has trouble walking, stay awake, when she gets punished, the beatings and all of this. And also you watch as, you know, she stops focusing on her grief, the pain in her shoulder subsides, or it goes away partially as she starts to find more strength in herself and determination to get out of this situation. So that was very interesting to see, you know, like as she kind of refound herself in a way, the pain in her shoulder, that phantom pain, went away. Okay, but what's one aspect of this book that I found kind of cringeworthy? It's that for some reason, Miley, Wes, and Brent had like a love triangle going on. Like, Wes was interested in Miley, but Brent had kind of like already staked claim to Miley, and she was like, I can't handle it from either of you guys right now. But that's also what drove Wes and Brent to go and look for her and track her and literally like camp in the woods for months on months on months. That competitiveness, eventually it does go down, but it just was not a very endearing quality. And it was like they were competing with each other to see who loved her the most, who would be her knight in shining armor. It was just very weird. The way that I can kind of like compare it is they weren't originally searching for her in like the quote, like, we need to find her, you know, we just need to find her because we care about her. Not, and so instead of that, their perspective or like their underlying tone was more, we need to find her so she can figure out which one of us she kind of wants to be with, or she likes more or loves more. Kind of like a little bit of pissing matches between the two men until they start like really tracking her and following her hair. And Brent eventually at one point is like, I have a whole pocket of her hair from what we've tracked. And that's kind of when they're just like, we just need to get our people home. Like, we need to get our girl home. And then eventually Raina as well. To kind of close this all up, it's been a long review. One thing that I really liked about this book, a lot of thrillers don't have this, but it was a happy ending with a bow tied on it. Like a nice little ribbon, a nice little bow. It was a happy ending. Brent and Miley, they get to have their child. They get together. They go to the next Olympics in 2026. Raina is there with their child, and it's just a very sweet interaction, and they get what they wanted all along. They're back together. Miley is all in one piece, but you don't get to see any of like the emotional trauma that her and Raina had to deal with and how they dealt with it. Instead, you just saw like the pretty bow. So a lot of thriller books don't end like that. They kind of end on a, you know, like a little mystery type of thing, you know, cliffhanger, and you never get another one. But this one, you do get that, which it was a nice change of pace. I have like mixed feelings about it, but overall, I think I really did enjoy that part of it. So that is my review on Gray After Dark by Noelle W. Ihli. Thank you once again to Dynamite Books for allowing me to be an early reader. Gray After Dark will be available on March 22nd, 2024. So, you know what time it is. If you enjoyed this video review of a thriller book, Gray After Dark, consider giving it a like. And if you are looking for more content, anything having to do with books or just life in general, consider subscribing to my channel. I post new content every Friday. And if you subscribe, you will not miss out on a single video. So thank you so much for watching. I really hope you pick up this book. If you happen to read it or you're wanting to read it, let me know what your thoughts are in the comments below. I love to see those and kind of hear everybody else's opinions on these books that I review. I think it's really cool that we can connect in that way, and that's the beauty of the internet, honestly. I've got to go. I have a very busy week. My lunch break is now quite short, and I will see you all next time. I'll see you guys next Friday, okay?